All right, good morning, five-star real estate agents. February 23rd, another winter session begins. Our topic for today is going to be what to do with the acknowledgement signatures that you have seen within purchase agreements. And most often, these are signatures at the very bottom of a purchase agreement between two parties that will give language the sorts of buyer acknowledges receipt of seller's response to buyer's offer, or seller acknowledges receipt of buyer's acceptance. How many of you have seen those? I know anyone who works with the Michigan Regional Purchase Agreements, formerly known as the West Michigan Regional, you'll see that in sections 37 and 38 quite often. And Don, let me ask you a wonderful question here with acknowledgement signatures. Are they needed?
Maybe. No.
Well, there you go, folks. We want to thank you for coming to this session.
No, they're not. There is a widely held um, belief that you have to get an acknowledgement signature in order for a contract to be enforceable. In other words, let's pretend, for example, a seller gets an offer, they accept it as written, and at that moment, you have an enforceable offer. Once you deliver that back by email, the moment that you push the button send and share it with the other agent, you have an enforceable offer. Some agents think that it's not enforceable until you get that final acknowledgement signature, and that's not true. It is enforceable once you have come to a meeting of the minds. If, for example, there's a counteroffer and the buyer accepts the counteroffer from the seller, again, at that moment, you have a meeting of the minds, the contract is enforceable, and the acknowledgement signature is not required.
How many of you, if you can go to the very bottom, you'll see a little reaction. If you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, there's a button that will show react. You can give a thumbs up or any symbol, doesn't matter. But how many of you have ever had a lender come back to you and say, hey, we need this acknowledgement signed? Well, if you haven't, some of us have, and it's odd because truly the banks don't understand real estate contract law. It's just clear. It's not required. But you might say, well, how did we get to this point? I mean, why is it that the banking institutions are requiring it and some of our brokers are requiring an acknowledgement signature? Well, back some time ago during our administrative laws, there was a Rule 307 that was created. And the Rule 307 was a Michigan real estate administrative rule that required licensees to provide clients with a copy of any document they signed, including purchase agreements, listing agreements, and any addendum. And the copy had to be delivered at the time of signing or within a reasonable time frame. Now, why was this Rule 307 in real estate implemented? Well, it was created to basically protect consumers and ensure transparency in real estate transactions. And its primary purpose were a couple things. One, it was there to prevent fraud or unauthorized contract changes. Uh, these acknowledgement signatures were there to ensure clients understood and had proof of what they signed. It helped to promote honesty and professional conduct by the real estate agent. And it helped create documentation in case of disputes or legal claims. And the biggest one was it helped reinforce licensees' duties under the Michigan Occupational Code. Now, how was this Rule 307 applied in practice? Well, agents were required to provide signed and fully executed document contracts to all parties. Brokerages often added the signature page acknowledgement stating that the client received a copy to prove compliance. That's what this came down to. This Rule 307 and this acknowledgement really was for the broker to have a clear understanding that the agent provided a fully executed copy of the contract to the party to ensure that they were in compliance with the occupational code. Hopefully that makes sense. And what's interesting is that this Rule 307 was currently rescinded in 2025 with the new uh, occupational codes that were updated as part of a Michigan's regulatory modernization. uh, it was removed, it was rescinded. But what they did is that it's not truly rescinded. It was that there were already other codes in the occupational code that addressed this issue of ensuring that you, as a real estate agent, were required to provide a full copy of any signed documents to the client. And that's still a rule, that's still an obligation that real estate agents must have. Anytime you have executed documents, you are required to make sure that your client has a copy of this. Now, the great thing is that when dotloop came along, dotloop automatically shared a lot of the executed contracts. So when your client, let's say your buyer agent, signed a document, it was automatically shared to your client. Or when a contract was executed by the seller and it came back, it was automatically shared between yourself and your client, therefore ensuring that you are following the current occupational code of making sure your client has signed documentation in place. Uh, Without signed documentation, there could be potential lawsuits against you for civil infraction for not providing proper documentation to your client when you should be. And so I guess what I can do here is, Don, let me ask you this. Is there anything further that you have on Rule 307 or that you would like to reaffirm?
Well, the Rule 307 actually goes back, I mean, even farther than that, the practice of using it it goes back to the horse and buggy days when a real estate agent would knock on the door of a farm and say, "Do you want to sell?" And they say, "Sure, find me a buyer." And then he goes down the road, 6, 7 miles and knocks on another door. "Do you want to buy the farm I just listed?" And they say, "Okay, here's an offer." And then you go back and forth. And it was not necessarily a viable contract until both parties had a clear understanding that they had reached a meeting of the minds. And so there was that sort of practice that also led to the rule that you're talking about. I will say, however, your question about how many lenders will ask for it, and they will. And in fact, yesterday I got an offer on a listing of mine, and we went back and forth. It was accepted by the seller as written. I sent over the fully executed contract to the buyer agent, and the buyer agent then sent me back an acknowledgement. And I thought, okay, well, that's a little bit old school, but sometimes we're going to be asked by other brokers to get an acknowledgement signature because that's their brokerage practice. And bottom line is, I why waste the energy having a conversation about it? Just get it. I mean, it's not that tough with Dotloop.
Yeah. I mean, even though that we're right most of the time, like 99.99% of the time, I mean, is it really worth fighting for a simple signature? And I'd probably say no. Just get it done. But it is an interesting concept that so many times just having an additional acknowledgement signature, it's not warranted. But you might get kickback from lenders and other brokers because they want to ensure that they're following compliance guidelines. Even though your compliance guideline is that once you have a fully executed copy and you've submitted it back to the other party and to your own client, you've fulfilled your obligation.
And Eric,
So
may I
please,
add, thank you. From my previous broker, I used to manage many years, Century 21 brand example. they use this policy, office policy, broker's policy. They always encourage buyers to bottom line, to sign that acknowledgement for the reason that you both, Eric and Don, were saying, because sometimes, I guess in the past, there were buyer lawsuits suing the broker, claiming they never got the contract accepted offer, and they couldn't prove because sometimes they used to deliver by hand, physically, right? Not an email. They didn't, and that's why I think they had, and it was, I think, not bad policy to have as a proof to have a signature. And that's why probably when you run, like Eric was saying, if you run to some agents that they believe that policy should be carried from every broker, it's not worth fighting. It's better just explain to your buyer and just, hey, throw that extra signature. It's no big deal, right? But
Yeah, it's just odd because we're going to be in a time frame right now where, again, this Rule 307 has been rescinded, but it's been reincorporated back into other statutes that are already on the books based on things that we're already supposed to do. So this was more of a redundancy rule, and the legislature was trying to streamline the language that's currently there and to improve upon current practices because dot loop or skyloop or some of these other programs automatically now send the documents to fulfill our obligation. So, and we have track and proof of it and activity showing that we are in compliance. So the bottom line anymore, was it really necessary? No. But if you're asked for it, why fight? Just get it signed. This today is a very short winter session. We just wanted to try to verify and let people know what bottom lining is, this acknowledgement signature. And I'd like to open up to any questions, or if you need me to go through another example of what this is pertaining to, we'd love to. Cindy, unmute.
Okay, not to confuse the situation, but I do have a question on our purchase agreement. What they did with ours, if you have a counteroffer, and you're negotiating that, we actually have what's on ours is a line 39 seller receipt. Seller accepts and acknowledges receipt of buyer's acceptance of counteroffer. But it also states, there is if accepted by seller is written, it's a receipt, but then it says if amended by seller, accept seller's counteroffer, all other terms and conditions remain unchanged. Buyer acknowledges that there will be a binding agreement between parties only when the seller signs paragraph 39, which states number 39, seller accepts acknowledged receipt of buyer's acceptance of counteroffer. And what they have done is saying basically you can still negotiate those counteroffers until it's signed by line 39. Even if the buyer acknowledged it, you could still accept another one. What do you think of that?
So they've really put this into a gray area.
Yeah.
So you're saying basically a buyer sends over a contract, the seller looks at it, counters it, goes back to the buyer accepts the seller's counteroffer, but now we're making a claim that even though the buyer accepted that counteroffer, the seller still needs to bottom line the
Yep.
final. They need to accept it. The buyer accepted the counteroffer, which makes no sense whatsoever because you've already at that point already had a meeting of the minds. But here's what trumps it. The language within the purchase agreement is
Yep.
trumping the normal standard of a meeting of the minds. So that it's very bizarre because in your situation, you have an offer that went out, comes back, the buyer accepts the counteroffer, and now we're waiting on the seller to finalize the transaction. And what's terrible about that practice is that there's probably no time frame for that seller to act within. And if they're truly making that statement, then that buyer could potentially rescind the purchase agreement at any time up until the time that that seller signs and returns it back to the buyer. It's
Correct.
just it's another layer of
Yeah, I
complexity.
think that will make a very interesting court case someday. When a buyer accepts an offer on Monday and the seller doesn't sign line 39 until Tuesday, or Tuesday has passed, and now 24, 36 hours has passed, and the buyer finds out, oh, wow, I just discovered that the seller sold the house to somebody else after I signed that agreement, agreed to their terms. Yeah, that's going to end up in court.
Yeah, and it's, you think that you have an accepted offer, but I mean, it's happened to me too. A cash offer could come in between then, and hey, even though they sent we accepted, the buyer did not or the seller did not bottom line, cash offer came in and they went with that offer, put us in backup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a
Well,
very dangerous form in line 39. I think it's just begging for a lawsuit.
And Eric or Don, can you explain this question Jason has? It says on the West MI purchase agreement, sellers sometimes sign paragraph 37, approval, and 39, receipt before buyer signs the number 38, receipts, acceptance. Is this an okay practice? I've seen it time to
No,
time, and which is not.
no,
we
short answer. No, it's not. Um, and sometimes it happens. We have to be careful because sometimes with dot loop, it will happen that you will actually inadvertently drop in signatures because they're your signature boxes for your, let's say for your seller, for example, and they will go in and sign them before the buyer signs whatever it is, or the next paragraph. Uh, we have to be very careful before we send out dot loop forms that they are accurate, and having the seller or buyer pre-sign something before the other party has responded is a very dangerous practice.
and a lot of times it's people probably might be in a hurry and the signatures were already there and you go down and you quickly assign them, like Don was saying, and you pre-sign it before you send it off for the seller to accept the signature, and it's already pre-signed, and you're just like, well, that's weird, because now if a seller counters that buyer, that document would have already shown that the buyer accepted it, that they would have pre-signed it before the counter offer came.
Yeah.
So
And if you're in dot loop, just to be clear, if you're preparing documents for your buyer, for example, and it loads in that buyer's name for a pre-signature below the seller's acceptance box, remove it. Take the authorization away from, or the assignment away from the buyers, that you can click up in the upper left, remove that, make it no one, and before you send it out.
yeah, so let me jump in here. Let me show you what we were referring to on one of the examples. Can everyone see this? Don,
Yes.
group, can you see? Okay. So here is what we were referring. This was just one option. There's multiple different languages within different purchase agreements, but this was the Michigan Regional, formerly the West Michigan Regional. But here's where a buyer, they would have signed up above and above this line 35 somewhere. And then this is where the two options are, where the seller comes back and the seller just clicks as is and signs and returns it. Deal's ready to go. Or the seller says, well, wait a minute, I want to do a counter offer. It's as written, except they put in language here, they sign it, and now it's a counter offer. And this is where it says down here, buyer's acceptance. Buyer acknowledges receipt of seller's response to buyer's offer. We're not acknowledging receipt In this case, in the event seller's response constitutes a counteroffer, which is what this would have been if they choose as written, this is now a counteroffer. Buyer accepts said counteroffer. This is where they would sign. It would go back to the seller. Now, would the seller need to sign this acknowledgement? No, because they already had a fully executed purchase agreement. If the language states that they have to sign it, like in GLAR, then yeah, we need to follow the language within the purchase agreement. So just understand that there are acknowledgments and then there are actual acceptance. And we just need to make sure we're reading the language. And if you want to, you can always uh, Google or do a review on Rule 307, administrative rule, to find more information. But it's been rescinded, but at least you would understand it's truly about ensuring that your client gets a fully executed contract in their hands so that they can never say, well, I don't recall signing that. I don't recall you not providing that to me.
A question, Eric, I'm sorry. On this, what they're saying, a couple of times I experienced myself being in broker support where unintentionally our agents, buyers sign that bottom line, that acknowledgement. And is any way, maybe this question might be more for Bree than you guys, but can we remove from that loop that automatically populates signatures, like the acknowledgement? Maybe that's a signature part to be removed as populated automatically and do it manually. I don't know if that's possible. I think that will support our agents not to do it by mistakenly to send it over for signature.
I think it's a really good question, Luis, and I think that we need to reach out to Dotloop and see if that can be done.
Okay.
Scott had a question.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I too came from a brokerage that required every purchase agreement to be bottom lined. So I guess my first question is, what's the requirement or what does Five Star want me to do?
There is no bottom line requirement at Five Star.
Okay, that
We
answers,
just we want to make sure that you can prove that if you do get a fully executed purchase agreement, that it's submitted to the other party and submitted to your client so that they have fully executed copies of everything. And that would ensure that you are in compliance with occupational codes.
okay. I will adapt. I'm sure a few other, I look at, I don't, not everybody, but there seems to be a few other confused faces that looking back at me. The West Michigan Regional Form was just revised as of January this year. Why didn't they remove those signatures areas?
Great question. Because it's not required. But here's what I can tell you. They've left those in there to help brokers ensure that the agents are being held accountable to be able to ensure that they have proper documentation being submitted to their clients and acknowledgments. But it's not an official requirement or law that those need to be signed. And that's very
Okay.
clear.
Okay, so I've always made sure my client, either buyer or seller, receives a signed copy. So I feel good about that, but I'll be honest with you, the last few minutes, it's been a little gray area over here for me trying to figure out the logic of where we're going, where we should go. But so thanks for answering my questions.
Sure.
And can I add one thing for Scott and all agents? Now, when you, like Eric was saying, to make sure you send it, you have proof you send it to your buyer, accepted offer. Don't assume the buyer received, let's say, your email, because your email can go in their spam folder. So make sure they responded, they replied, they got your contract, signed contracts. Make sure you got that proof, okay? So
Yeah,
just to
and
be
if you're
safe.
using Dotloop and you share that fully executed purchase agreement, they'll have that record in their Dotloop, which would be more than sufficient for ensuring that you're following the administrative codes. Any other questions? I think let's see.
What
So
about the
sellers,
use of what about the use of addendums for counteroffers?
the use of addendum for a counteroffer, that would be sufficient. So you're going to
Yeah.
basically, it's going to be accepted as written, accept, and then you're going to have a counteroffer on an addendum, right? That addendum would come back to the buyer. The buyer would end up signing that addendum, counteroffer addendum. And once it gets returned back to the seller, you're under contract.
And Jason has a question. So seller's receipt is not required if seller accepts offer as written, that's his question.
Correct. If you have a purchase agreement and it's being accepted as written, that seller only needs to sign one time. And then once it gets returned back to the buyer, you now have an executed purchase agreement. The buyer would have signed it initially, provided it to the seller. The seller would have accepted it as written, signed it, and returned it. Once it gets returned, you're now under contract.
Unless you're practicing in Lansing.
Unless you're practicing in Lansing, where the language is now requiring acknowledgement.
Those darn Lansing agents anyway.
Every one of them's a troublemaker. I tell you.
Any
Any
other
other
questions?
Yeah, we think alike. Anyway, any other questions on any topic?
What's your daily words of wisdom today, Don?
Go list a house. I'm not kidding about that. About a month ago, I got a call from a client, and they said, "Well, we're getting our house ready to sell." And I said, "Oh, goody." And they said, "So about the time that the you know buds start showing up on the plants and trees and so on, we're going to list our house." And I said, "Great." I said, "The only thing I want to mention is that you have no competition right now. 0 homes like yours are on the market. So you're saying you want us to list the house now in January?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, that's crazy. I mean, there's snow this deep. I mean, literally, the camera person had to walk through hip deep snow in order to take the pictures." The house sold in 5 days. It was $495,000. It sold in 5 days. We've already closed. 10 days ago, I got a call from someone who wanted to list their condo, $300,000. And they said, "We're going to list it sometime in March." I said, "Okay, let me share some information. You have 0 competition. Sold in 4 days. Go list houses now. There is very little competition. Buyers are out there, and the market is active if you have the ability to get listings." It's my advice for the day.
Yes, I thought I was going to say something. The bottom line would be that even though that Rule 307 no longer exists as an administrative rule, real estate agents are still legally and professionally expected to provide clients with signed copies of contracts and ensure that transparency is available on all real estate transactions. So it's not only just signed contracts, it's listing agreements. Once you get a listing agreement signed by your client needs to get a copy of that. Agency disclosure forms, once they sign it, they need to get a copy. Anything that your client touches and signs, they need to get a copy of. And if you're not doing that, make sure that you change that practice and ensure that your client gets copies of everything that they sign.
Oh, just as a word of reassurance, we have this thing called the activity log in Dotloop. And when we and our agents get accused of not sharing the information, we can actually go back and identify the moment to the very minute that the information was shared with our clients. So, and we've had to do that when we faced lawsuits and grievance complaints and so on.
All right, any final questions? Please ask away.
All right, Eric, just want to say, well, going back to that acknowledgement, sorry, to kind of refer to Scott. I don't want Scott to be now disappointed that signature is gone. I think it's okay for us for you guys to sign it. It's not gonna hurt. It's just extra protection. So feel free, in my opinion, to sign if you like to do it. It's just extra protection, not necessarily not needed, but you know, what if
Yeah,
you feel more okay,
it's not
just sign it.
required. It's not required by law.
Yeah.
But yes, if you're practicing that way and you feel good about that and you want to make sure that your client is truly aware that you can have proof to show that they received a copy, that's fine. It's not going to hurt.
Yeah, because sometimes some buyers, they might think maybe, oh, who knows, weird. Well, why is acknowledgement signature there? And I wasn't being asked to sign. So maybe for that reason, maybe, okay, put all the signatures, there, that's okay. So,
Well, here's a question that came up. Luigi, you look really amazing in that sweatshirt that you have on there. How do we
oh,
get one?
well, it's through 5 Star app in that you shop it
Yeah, there you go.
in our store. It's cool one, actually. I love
Thank
it.
you. Cindy,
Okay, I had a question on the affiliated business disclosure from another brokerage. Are our clients required, because we get it a lot, are our clients required to sign those for the other brokerage?
Only if they are for for another brokerage.
Yeah, and they're not using that title company, because I've had this come up quite a few times that the broker is requiring, even though your buyer is not using this title company, that they need to sign it.
No, they're not required to. Not if they're not using, and that holds true of 5 Star agents who are not using Star Title, for example. But if they have any vendor, inspectors, or anything that they are receiving money from in the course of the transaction, they absolutely have to have it signed.
But
But no,
not from the other party. I mean, this is like, yeah, I've gotten it quite a few times from a couple brokerages.
yeah, not required.
I'm not sure where that's coming from. I do know that one thing that might potentially be missed would be certain home warranties from affiliate business arrangement disclosure
Mhm.
that some clients will typically use American Home Shield, and then months later they'll clock in and maybe get a rebate from them for enrolling that client. If there's any type of money that you will be benefiting from, you should put that on the disclosure, whether it comes to fruition or not. It's better to have something on there if you think that you might be getting something back from a company than not to disclose it. So if you're even unsure that maybe this company might be getting some, put it in there.
I've got a unrelated question.
Yes.
One of my clients asked me, and my advice was get a real estate lawyer. But basically, husband and wife, the wife is on the deed of the house, the husband is not. They're married for 10 years. She wants to put the house in a trust in the name of the kids, or a trust that's owned by the children. Can she do that?
I think you've got really good advice in hiring an attorney. And here's the reason why. Michigan is a
Dowry,
I'm sorry?
dowry, dowry rights?
Dowry rights would have no bearing on this, in my opinion. Eric, that's kind of gone away, right?
Gone away. Yeah.
However, there is still I'm trying to think of the phrase, um, common property, something like that, where if you end up having a divorce, they will actually, regardless of who owns the property, who's the person on title, they will start splitting it up. So the husband, even though he's not on the title, may have some legal interest in the property. And I would caution that we should not be giving a legal opinion on the ability of the wife to put the property in anyone's name other than hers and maybe her husband's. This is really a legal question.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and then it falls into it, who's going to be the executor of the trusts. Is it going to be the husband and wife initially until they're passing, and then it turns into the kids as executor? There's a lot more questions. There's a lot more issues and concerns. Then you got to deal with cost basis of the original home value, any potential short-term or long-term capital gains. Well, we try to put it in a trust to avoid capital gains. It protects people. So once someone dies, the the heirs of that trust won't pay taxes. That's how we shield taxes. But I don't want to go in and start making statements to someone when this really should be a great conversation for a tax attorney or a real estate attorney to set up a trust and be able to help guide them properly with one, reducing taxation, and number two, properly how to place that asset into a trust properly.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all for joining.
All right.
And we'll see you again next week, I think, right?
Great week.
We got one more week?
I think so.
Okay. Bye now.
At least.
You. It's
Take
great.
care.